cigar. Michael Faraday claimed it was a magnet. This is Faraday in his workshop in the basement from a contemporary etching. This is the actual place that they've reconstructed. The shelves don't quite look the same, and I'm sure that cat box wasn't there in Faraday's time, but a lot of the apparatus was. And I'd like to move to one final experiment. This, in the table behind the glass wall, were these bits of equipment, and you can recognize this is a compass needle. There is a battery, I think it's a 50 plate battery, and I just happen to have brought a piece of wire and a compass and a battery, and I'd like one more volunteer to hold the wire for me and then tell everybody what happened. Rose, it's about time you did something for this experiment. All you have to do is hold the wire there, all right? And don't burn yourself on the candle, please.
Okay.
Now,
try not.
Just because you're an engineer and you know what's going to happen, just pretend it's a real experiment and you don't know what's going to happen, all right? Okay? Now, would you tell everybody what happened? Oh, you didn't watch? There.
Changes the needle.
It moved the needle.
Yeah.
And let's suppose it was like this and we were passing a current through there. Which way did the needle go for the benefit of everybody else that didn't see it? You can let it go now. That's all I wanted. Which way did the needle go? And where did it end up?
I don't think your thing is pointing there.
You don't think I'm calibrated properly?
No.
Would you agree that the needle ended up pointing at right angles to the wire?
Yes.
Yes. That's all I really wanted to get out of that. Thank you. That was one of Faraday's most remarkable observations, somewhere around about 1838, 1840, and it led him to the development of the Faraday-Maxwell equation, effectively. I mean, Maxwell developed the equation, but this idea that the field was at right angles to the flux. And it's the last comment I want to make about the breakdown of Newtonian physics. You cannot explain that on anything that comes from Newtonian physics, even if you wanted to. But it also provides a little segue which goes straight into another part of my career. One of the bits of apparatus which Michael Faraday left behind and lovingly preserved by the Royal Society. I think the real piece was actually put on a velvet cushion at one point, was this toroid. And the toroid had a couple of windings. If you want to see the way it was done, we've got his diaries still preserved. If you look at that and then look at this, if you take two of those toroids and put them somewhere close together, you make effectively a sort of a double transformer. And this single winding can either be a piece of wire which goes through it, or it could be salt water. And in fact, Faraday would recognize this sensor for measuring the amount of conductivity of the salt water. And if you know what the temperature is as well, you can work out what the salt content is. And we applied that to produce a very accurate, one of the world's most accurate sensors of conductivity of salt water. The alternative is that you do it with a 4-electrode bridge. And anybody who's used the 4-electrode bridge will know that you have immense problems with it. And it can get dirty, all kinds of things can go wrong with it. This can be used without any contact with the water at all. And we produced a foundation paper only 6 years ago on the performance of that, in which we showed that it was the best conductivity sensor. Michael Faraday would have loved it. 160 years later, we find that there's nothing new under the sun. He reminds us to consider the results of the simplest experiment and don't throw all his apparatus away. I was hearing Hans saying how when he had to move office at the university, he didn't have space for all the apparatus which he collected over the years for different experiments. Obviously your name is not Faraday, sir. I mean, and always be ready to move into other fields and think of applying things with other fields. So I want to begin, I want to end more or less where I began. Now you may wonder why I brought a piece of Lego here. And it's very interesting that, oops, going too far. There we are. Yeah. Lego recently brought out something they call Mindstorms, which is Lego robotics. It has an ARM core. I won't go through all its features, but it's a nice piece of kit. The important thing is it will control 4 motors using I2C connectors, and it will take 4 sensors. Thank you. And one of the sensors which it provides is this one with the 2 red lights on. The red lights are just to say it's on, but what is interesting, and I'll leave my glasses just to make sure I get the right program. It's designed for 9-year-olds and not for 90-year-olds. There we go. This is just for a bit of fun, but what it's doing, it's actually measuring where that candle is or where anything is in front of that. So we're right back to where I started. There's Leslie Kay's mobility aids for the blind being used for a Lego robot, and you can sit that and let it run forever. And that allows me to move on to the fun part of this talk, which was to go back to my real origins and the invention of Lego itself and how it reinvented itself and where it's using things which are more than 50 years old. Lego, if you don't remember, started in about 1935 with the manufacture of these little duck toys which you could pull around after you. There's a famous story about that there was a shipment of these things being sent out, and the owner suddenly realized they hadn't had their final coat of paint. He made his son, I think it was, go and fetch all the shipment back and put the extra coat of paint on. He was always concerned about quality. The reason I want to put it up is that we have used this to explore, well, we have used it. It has been developed as a method of opening up discussion, and I'm going to illustrate that now by giving you all a little kit of 6 pieces of Lego. My wife is going to help you out. Try and keep the Lego separate from any food or coffee on your table and from your neighbour's Lego kit. And just look at it for a moment, and I'm going to give you the question in just a second. Have you all got one? Oh, there's yours. Okay. Right. Don't open the bag just yet. They're coming. Right. Have you all got one that wants one? If you don't want to play, it's perfectly acceptable not to play. All right. You may open the bag, and I'm going to give you 2 minutes taking the pieces that you've got in the bag to build a duck. Just like that duck which you saw. So I've reminded you what a duck looks like. Build a duck. Off you go. I'll set the watch going. And just in case you're timing this, I warn you that I run to a special Lego time, which doesn't bear any relation to any other time. We're about halfway. Everybody finish it? Yes, all right? Is it good? Anybody else? Are you all done? Are you all done? Are you a chicken? Well, have a look around and compare your duck with everybody else's at the table. Just have a look. Does anybody have the same duck? Have we got anybody that's got the same duck? Everybody is different. Yeah. The story here is very simple. You have all been given the same set of bricks. You've all been given the same challenge. You've all been given the same time. And you've all built a different answer to the question. And that is a very fundamental engineering point to make. That, you know, I've got how many people in here? 40 people? I've got 40 solutions to the problem. If you want to have a different solution, just get another few people in. In fact, going back to dear Professor Waugh, my orthopedic colleague, he used to have a sign in his office. He said, if you want a second opinion, come and see me again tomorrow. Now, I'd like you to put your ducks back in the bag. We would like the ducks back, please. Yeah. You can talk to me later if you really want your duck, but you have to talk to me. The issue is that we are showing you a very simple example of how Lego can be used to explore. I haven't quite finished, if you don't mind. Sorry. Yeah, I'm getting hand signals. We're using Lego to explore the concepts in your discussion by using metaphors. And you can use the whole system of Lego with specially constructed bits with more complicated questions over a longer period of time to A, have fun together, but B, explore complicated questions. And that is an example of a reinvention of Lego itself. Lego almost failed about 10 years ago and went completely bankrupt. And it reinvented itself. One of the things it did, astonishingly, it started to listen to customers. But the other thing is it spread out into many different areas. And this is a little bit of something called Lego Serious Play, which has used something which we often forget about. We went around the institute at the university today and saw laboratories full of computers, full of 3D printers, full of all kinds of things which no longer use the hands. And Professor Kunoff and I were reminiscing over lunch about how disastrous it was that the workshop had been taken away from the Institute of Medical Engineering. And we have forgotten that our hands actually represent an immense amount of what goes on in the brain. This is something which Penfield noticed in 1934. Penfield was the famous neurosurgeon in Montreal who noticed and mapped out the representation of the brain with the hands and said, look, there's a huge connection here. And what we're doing in that very simple example and what we're doing in Lego Serious Play is exploring that, using that, and allowing people to move into new levels of discussion. So, raising the discussion to another level. And that brings us to an end. I hope that's been entertaining. And I would like to thank you for all the ducks coming back. And thank you very much.
On behalf of the Toronto Network, I would like to present a thank you token to Frank.
Thank you very much. All right, there's a way of doing this. You hold it with that hand. There you are. Thank you. It's been a pleasure being here. It's Lego. Oh, excellent. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We'll take these back. Thanks.
It's rather interesting.
Thank you everyone for coming.
There are many surgeons, but there is no test of manual dexterity to become a surgeon.
No. Well, we did in orthopedics, but yeah. Thanks.
Does anybody need a parking ticket? We haven't got it yet.
Thank you very much.
It's a free parking.
That's good. Perfect. Thanks.
And if you have to sign in to let us know that you're here, can you make sure that you do that just so that we make sure we know who was here? Thank you, everyone.